Hello everyone, this is part 8 of What If Naruto Got Lost in Time, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Minato followed Naruto with a keen eye, unsure if his incisiveness was only having him make hypothetical theories or actual conclusions. He hadn't gotten anything so far. Naruto was different, though that was obvious to any observant shinobi. The blonde Junin was almost disturbingly intuitive, with a vast, almost omniscient knowledge that he seemed to keep a vigilant watch over. Though, Minato thought that if he just asked, he might get the answers he wanted. Mostly, Naruto only followed Obito around good-naturedly, amused as the boy lead him around to various arcades, bookstores, local shops, and of course, the ramen stand. Naruto seemed to get along well with his team, even Kakashi to an extent, though the two of them seemed cordial at best. Minato didn't really mind, after all, it was good for his team to socialize, though that didn't stop him from carefully keeping an eye on the other blonde. For the Junin was certainly stronger than he let on. Minato was certainly struggling to understand the blonde, though what he didn't now, was that the blonde was struggling to understand himself. He inherently was aware that a large part of who he was came from his parents. Genetics, and all. Minato was obviously his physical correlation, as the two of them could pass for twins if they wanted to. And Kushina, well, Kushina was the reason why a lot of people weren't too surprised he was such a stubborn, mulishly immature kid when he was younger. And that was really all he'd thought of his mom. She was really pretty, yeah, and really nice when she wanted to be, though mostly she just had a temper. There was something almost flat to the dynamic, a linear, straight accepted idea that this was his mother. She was fiery, and beautiful, and strong. But not like Minato. Minato was fiery, strong and real. Naruto understood him more as a person, rather than a figment of time fixated in a single, memory-like dream place. But Kushina was inadvertently going to change that. It was only pure, unadulterated luck, or, perhaps in a way, misfortune, that the two managed to meet while in line for coffee. And by then, it was only polite to stay and talk. Not that Naruto had any intentions of doing so, no, not when it was more awkward standing in her presence than he'd ever imagined it to be. This was his mother, but she was just a pleasant-looking woman with fiery, sea-blue eyes. Just a stranger. I heard you went on a mission with Minato-san. Ah, back to the formalities again. How was it? You don't have to pretend to me. Naruto waved her off with a wry grin. I know all about you too. More than you probably know yourself. Kushina blushed. Ah, sorry, it's just habit now, and with a far-off look. It's not good for people to know about us, you know. His reputation and all that. His reputation. Naruto echoed, sipping his coffee and choking. Straight black. The two had moved from decorous greetings in the coffee line to sitting at one of the tables in an inevitable socially acceptable dance that two reluctant acquaintances did when meeting awkwardly away from the usual circle of friends. Yeah. She leaned into her hand, propped on her elbow against the table, stirring her own chai tea morosely. You know, him being the Yondaime and all that. Yellow Flash, all those who were kids out to get him, blah, blah, blah. She rolled her eyes with a silly, exasperated smile, appearing so nonchalant that Naruto knew, from experience, that she was faking it. After all, he made that expression himself. But that's not really what bothers you, is it? Kushina stilled. No. It wasn't Minato's infamous reputation. It was hers. Though there were people few and far between who were aware of the nine-tailed demon fox in her stomach. And those were a dangerous group of people. Kushina blinked, pulling her head away from her hand. I know what you are. He spoke, demurely. At this, she violently moved away, jogging her elbow from the table and clutching one hand to the armrest of the chair. The wall of vague, courteous amiability shattered completely. What are you? He smiled, yieldingly. I am one too. Naruto wondered how time could allow this, one nine-tailed demon fox in Kushina, and one in Naruto. How did time allow any of this? He wondered belatedly. How was it even physically possible for him to be sitting here next to Kushina, staring into her watercolored eyes and watching the color drain out of her face? You mean the tension eased from her shoulders. A Jinchuriki. Yes. He nodded, still smiling. There are 9 of them, you know. Of course I know. She bristled, looking annoyed he thought her so dim. What pride. He snickered to himself. Definitely runs in the family. I just didn't think I'd meet any others, I guess. We're not exactly common, you know. More than you'd think. Naruto laughed. After all, every ninja had their own demons. Just not physically sealed to their stomach. Does Minato know about you? Kushina asked hesitantly, probably the most decorous he'd seen of her. Naruto shook his head. No, she looked relieved. Then he added, but I'm going to tell him. She deflated. You should tell him too, you know. Naruto advised seriously. After all, when it came to sealing him it'd be pretty messed up if Minato was completely unaware his wife was a Jinchuriki. I know. She blew at her bangs. Every time I get around to it, something gets in the way. Or I get in the way. Sometimes I wake up and think, today I'll tell him. And then, I don't. I end up just putting it off again, like I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity that I know will never come. The one who knows is Sandaime-sama, and Mito-sensei, she did, anyway. Kushina looked down. Before she SD. Naruto nodded, unsure of what to say. He'd never had to deal with one of his closest friends, let alone a teacher. Not even Sasuke, who seemed to have drifted so far away from him, was still alive, tangibly. I thought I was alone. She whispered. Well, you're definitely not alone, said Naruto, seriously, before grinning. And anyway, you have Minato. You guys can have a big, happy family, don't you think? She smiled softly. Yeah. And then, with conviction. Yeah. A big family. Like 12 kids or something. Naruto blanched. That would hurt, wouldn't it? Who cares? Kushina laughed, and for someone so loudly offensive she had a perfect bell-like laugh. And a smile that split her face into wide, brimming happiness. His smile. I've always wanted a lot of kids. A ton of kids. Naruto watched her, this woman of happiness, wondering if his smile looked as forced as it felt. I'm sure you'll get it. He promised, with false sincerity. ... He felt a little bad, lying to Kushina like that. Mostly though, he just felt bad for himself, even though he didn't know why. After all, he had the most loving, wonderful parents in the world. They just hadn't been there when he'd needed them the most. Naruto was beginning to realize why people took his father so seriously, some even shaking at the thought of his mere memory. He certainly hadn't been made Yondaime for no reason, as it seemed even subconsciously the man had picked up on Naruto's oddities, even when the blonde tried fervently to hide them. The summon thing seemed to be really grating on him, as if part of him wanted to believe Naruto, a boy who'd given him no reason to distrust him, and the other, more rational part knew it to be a farce. Maybe it was time for some truth between all his white lies. And the least he could do was warn the guy, right? This was what he was going to lose his life to. Which was why, as he put down his ramen and quietly thanked Tsuki for the nice meal, he made his way to the training grounds. They weren't far, and Naruto found his thoughts wandering to the future. He'd expected Jiraiya to call him back now. They hadn't figured a way to fix the continuum issue, so every day he spent in the past was still a day not there in the future. It had been about 3 weeks or so, and while he was thoroughly enjoying his time here, every time he saw Team 7 he thought of the half-remembered dream of a red-colored bridge, a lazy sensei and a rival with a blackened soul, still existing somewhere in the lapse of time. Every time Rin smiled, Sakura did too, somewhere in his memories. He could go back there, if he wanted. One seal and he'd be there, leaning against that red bridge and looking into that watery sky. But it wouldn't be the same. He entered the clearing, full of 3-pronged kunai sticking up out of the ground, the trees, and even a few training poles. A yellow blur was racing around them, throwing more and more kunai until the ground was so effectively skewered with them it seemed to be made of spikes. One came Naruto's way, and he caught it deftly. A few seconds later, and Konoha's yellow flash near barreled straight into him, teleporting to the kunai in Naruto's hand and rolling out of the way. Minato blinked up at him, disoriented. Up and at it already, huh? Naruto smiled. Minato rolled his eyes, getting up off the ground and dusting himself off. Seems you are too. Up and at it, eating ramen already. Minato grinned, pointing to his head. There's a noodle in your hair. Fart. He balked as he pulled it out. And Tuki had just stood there and waved back at him, letting him look like a fool. The guy probably thought it was funny, too. I didn't expect to see you here. Minato exclaimed, still smiling. It fell slowly though, as he realized Naruto wasn't smiling back. No. Naruto was studying him with intense delphinium eyes, as if contemplating his chakra patterns, his strengths and his weaknesses and his very soul. Minato swallowed. Perhaps he passed, because Naruto's eyes trailed back to his own, the sky and the ocean clashing against each other, like infinity to infinity. I want to fight you. Minato felt like the floor had dropped below him. And then, what? Naruto yelled his head. You don't want to. It's not that, Minato faltered. Though maybe it was. He'd never had an issue with some friendly sparring and camaraderie, but for some reason, he couldn't fathom the thought of fighting Naruto. As if it was some sort of inherent, cardinal sin. Well then come on. And then the grin was back, but it was fixed, vulturine smile, as if the blonde was avariciously picking him apart. You did say you wanted me to teach you something. Naruto reminded. But he'd meant some sort of inconsequential, interesting little thing, not a fight. Like they were enemies. Alright then. He steezed himself. Why not? Why not indeed? Naruto was just as fast as him, if not faster. Minato found himself wondering why Naruto had been so subservient on that mission, when he'd been under that strange-eyed man's power. Surely, he could have fought him tooth and nail, and won, even. Of course, Naruto had no intention of winning, or fighting at all. Each strike was parried effectively, and blades met, sprung apart, and met again. He bolted out of the fray, rolling on his feet and leaping for the higher advantage. Naruto joined him, the two flying into a taijutsu match that exceeded gravity for a moment, whirling punches and kicks, dodging and hits until the two descended back down. He nimbly blocked one of Naruto's kicks, using the velocity to drop onto one of the trees, Naruto doing the same. The blonde charged again, too fast for Minato to think of ninjutsu or genjutsu. The flurry of rapid taijutsu almost reminded him of speed fighting, so quick it was almost too much to keep up. He'd thought he'd finally gotten the jump on the blonde, parrying strikes in a gravity-defying knife fight, when Naruto acrobatically sprung away, giving Minato the briefest glimpse of inhuman-looking eyes before an unnatural red chakra seemed to seep out of him in puissant, burning waves. They met again, and Minato's eyes widened as he was met with not blue, but red irises on the blonde's face. A dojutsu. But then what was that red chakra? He didn't think much of it, continuing to fight tooth and nail for the advantage, getting as close as possible with such a short-ranged weapon. He didn't have any warning when the red chakra lashed out, swiping at his chest with a ferocity. The blonde Hokage recoiled, springing away to land some feet away from the other blonde, who was eyeing him with an apprehensive, if not determined look. What was that? He asked, voice strangled. His vest was wet with blood. Naruto had landed a hit with that chakra. I'm teaching you, Naruto said, a little too amiable for Minato's liking. Teaching me what? The other blonde asked rhetorically, wiping at the blood drooling down his vest. The wound was relatively shallow, but still annoying. Your blood limit. It's not a blood limit, Naruto explained by not explaining, looking exasperated at him. Minato paused. Then what is it? A demon? Shock colored the Yondaim's face, evident in the draining of his pallor, but he had no time for the words to truly set in, only a wave of panic as he quickly made to parry Naruto's quick strike. When he leapt this time, Minato made sure to give them more distance, keeping a furtive eye to the boiling red chakra, and the other to the blonde's lightning quick strikes. There wasn't even a need for ninjutsu at this point, the fight ascending to a much higher caliber than any elemental technique could assist. This strange demonic chakra almost reminded Minato of the gates. It seemed that by accessing it Naruto was incredibly faster, more powerful than he'd been before. Minato was hard-pressed to use the Harasshan. After all, if Naruto was using an ace card he should be allowed the same luxury. But he wasn't sure if it would exactly help, the extra speed, perhaps. But it wouldn't show him how to defeat this new level. We can stop now, Naruto said quietly, and it was then that Minato noticed he looked almost lost. The Hokage dropped his guard, but not without caution. What is? But then the red chakra receded. He amended. That. It's demonic chakra. The blonde began, cheerfully conversational. He sat himself down on the ground, motioning for Minato to follow. As you probably know by now, I'm a Jinchuriki. Minato blinked at him, blankly, following with great reluctance. What? Naruto froze. This was going to be a long conversation. Naruto paused, wondering how to word this. Well, I'm human, but I house a demon. Does that make sense? He thought on it, for a moment, the very mind-blowing idea of it. Yes. Minato stopped. But it doesn't seem possible. It's very possible. Naruto nodded, smiling as Minato carefully sat in front of him. And happens all the time. The blonde was looking at him unsurely. I'm sure you've heard of the nine-tailed demons. The myth. Minato scrunched his brows. About the moon and the first ninja. That one. Naruto interrupted, waving the rest off. Most of it is considered just myth, but those tailed demons are real. They're entities of chakra. It was said that the first Hokage used his Mokuton jutsu to seal these beasts and give them to other nations as peace treaties. That much is true. Ever since then, it's normal for Jinchuriki to be part of the Kage's family. And at Minato's blank gaze, he shrugged. It's a sign of trust. Wait. The blonde halted. I get that they're real. And that you quite obviously have one. But you're not a Sarutobi, are you? No. But you're a Konoha shinobi. So but where did I come from? Naruto smiled enigmatically. Minato mouth opened. Oh, so Naruto had been Uzushiogaku's Jinchuriki. And then his curiosity got the better of him. Which one do you? It doesn't matter. Naruto smiled, cutting him off. Minato hated to see it, that hurting half smile, as if Naruto thought he couldn't see right through it. And Konoha? Minato tried in vain to keep the nagging curiosity out of his voice. Does Konoha have one too? And again, that evasive smile. I'm sure it does. How vague. But anyway. Naruto got up then, stretching out his back. That was a good match, I hope I taught you something interesting. You did. Minato answered, honestly. And this time, the returning grin was honest and true. And it made Minato all the more pleased to see it. Yeah. Good to know. Naruto chuckled. We should do this every week. I wouldn't mind, said the Yondaime, seriously. Naruto blinked at him, as if surprised that his offhanded comment was being met with such stunning austereness. The blonde trailed off, taken aback. Well, sure then, why not? Minato smiled. Naruto wasn't his student, and he wasn't Naruto's. And somehow, that made it all the better. To think, here was this boy who'd been here this whole time, overflowing with such vast, omnipotent knowledge. How had they not met before that fateful spring morning in Iwagakure? Where had Naruto been his whole life? That reticent, taciturn look to Naruto's face didn't suit him, Sakura thought, but there was little she could do about it. After all, how could she help him when he refused to help himself? Refused to let her help. The young Chunin could have punched the wall in her frustration. There was little else she feared, more than anything, and that was helplessness. Uselessness. And that was all she could feel right now. Where have you been? It was hard to not sound accusing. Naruto's turning into the dazzling, bright gold of the sun, turning and walking away from her. Showing up out of the ether 3 weeks later, an unreadable, somber expression to his face that she didn't appreciate. Naruto was her rock, an unmovable, indomitable cornerstone which assured her of complacency, assured her that Naruto was Naruto, and that no matter how far he went or how long he left, he would come back. And he had come back. But not in the sense of the word. As if part of him had wandered off, maundered into the distance where she couldn't follow, somewhere unreachable, and left a disoriented, metaphysical man in its wake. This was Naruto. Sort of. It was telling how his eyes moved towards the window, to birds flying like black silhouettes in the sky. Freedom. Somewhere, out there. But where? A mission. He decided upon, tasting the words like he did his takoyaki, as if decided whether they would satisfy her. An A-class. Tsunade wanted me on a solo. Tsunade. Sakura's eyes narrowed. Reluctantly, Naruto met them, as if realizing he'd been caught. You never call her Tsunade. No, just old woman, old hag, old bat. But Sakura could admit defeat when it stared her in the face. Naruto had his own troubles, his own issues, and she knew, though she may not want to admit it, that he could and would solve them on his own. He wasn't pushing her away. He was giving himself space. And though she truly would rather drop kick him in the face and physically wrench the answers out of his tea, if there was one thing Sakura had gained after the event of Team 7's breaking, it was patience. You're safe though, right? She whispered, beside herself. And okay. Truly. He nodded. I'm okay. And then, with a smile. I'm here, Sakura. But you're not. How is it? She asked airily, and made a vague motion with her hand. There. Wherever there is. Can you tell me that, at least? Is it cold? Do you eat enough? You're taking care of yourself, right? Of course I am. He chirruped, like a brief memory of himself. But Naruto hadn't been carefree in a long time. Since he had come back from the Valley of the End, he'd mitigated from a rash, worryless little kid to a determined, driven young man. And though he'd never really lost his sunny disposition, he'd lost that naivety, that guileless mulishness that used to define him. I always take care of myself, Sakura-chan. It's a little cold there right now, but it'll be warmer soon. I'm fed, yes. I have ramen every day, more so than I should, anyway. I've got a place to stay and everything. This was just as much a part of Naruto as the loud brat who used to obnoxiously pester her for ramen. And as a smile cracked at his face, she knew the worst was to come. I'm really happy there. Those were the words she didn't want to hear. ... Kakashi thinks you're depressed. The blonde snorted. Yeah. Kakashi also thinks Jiraiya isn't a pervert. His opinion doesn't count. How odd, to see Naruto without his usual, visceral temerity. There was no impulsiveness to his lingering gaze, to his easy, wanderer's gait and the slow arch of his shoulders. The summer heat made the air hot and sticky, carpeted like a thick dree of sweat and smelling like corn and farmlands. How Naruto managed to walk himself all the way out here, till the very edges of Konoha where nothing but sprawling farms held to the ground Shikamaru would never know. It was just him, the blonde, and this dirt path hat seemed to wind all the way into the setting sun. Shikamaru groaned, rubbing at the back of his head. Sakura's been harping on me too. She says we hang out a lot, so I should know things. But this was a clear overstatement. Because, though Shikamaru and Naruto were close, they certainly didn't hang out a lot. That was to say, if Naruto hung out with anyone. The blonde had been mysteriously absent as of late, something which Shikamaru had keenly taken notice of. The blue of his eyes slid to the lazy Junin beside him. And I told her it was too troublesome. Naruto snickered, shaking his head. Everything's too troublesome for you, isn't it? Well, a lot of things. Shikamaru shrugged, plodding beside the blonde sullenly. You, for one. Naruto smiled, a wrangled, warped mirror of its younger version. I feel like I've been doing that a lot to people lately. Being troublesome. Naruto nodded. Don't take it personally, said Shikamaru wryly. Pretty much everyone's troublesome. The blonde snickered. I won't then. Shikamaru let the conversation down, wondering if it was really worth it to take the effort to pry into Naruto's secrets. They were his own, undoubtedly, and Shikamaru really didn't have a need, or any sort of burning curiosity to pick the blonde apart. He'd always been a bit of a study in progress, and Shikamaru had learned to just let him unfurl as he would without prior prediction. The brunette sighed, before taking a breath. Naruto, he began slowly. All these people being more annoying than usual, wouldn't have anything to do with your mission, would it? And the blonde closed, not in any physical way, just a brief flutter of his closed eyes. Is this an interrogation? It depends. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Naruto's eyes opened, and he idly scuffed dirt with his shoes. Yes and no, said the blonde eventually, a certain voraciousness to his defeated voice. Sakura's just overreacting a bit. I think she expects me to defect from the village or something, but then again, she expects that out of everyone nowadays. And is it true? No. Naruto scoffed, scowling with irritation. Of course not. She's really worried, the brunette pointed out. And I know that she worries in general, but this is different. Sakura thinks I want to be on the mission more than I want to be home. And then, with a prolonged, exasperated look to Shikamaru's questioning gaze. Which I admit, might be a little true. So it's one of those alias missions. Something like that, yeah. Naruto didn't have the heart to tell him it was so much more than that. And he had a feeling Shikamaru didn't want to hear it anyways. Fortunately, the man was too lazy for his own good. Shikamaru sighed, looking up at a cloud with a digestive, if not lazy expression to his face. How troublesome. Naruto watched the same cloud. It's not just Sakura, Shikamaru revealed, blowing out a breath and giving a pointed look to Naruto. It's Kakashi, Hokage-sama, that dumb moron Kiba, somehow even between laps Lee has managed to notice. Naruto blanched. To think, all he had to do to get some attention around here was disappear for a few weeks. Talking makes you feel better, Shikamaru advised lightly. Hell no. And Naruto shot him down in flames. The lazy Nara looked like he was going to attempt round 2, but luckily for Naruto the two were interrupted as a Chunin whirled into existence from a cloud of smoke. He stepped out of the dissipating clouds, scroll held out in his hands. Uzumaki. For a moment, Naruto looked around for Kushina, before realizing that the Chunin was here for him. For me, Naruto said by way of greeting. The man, probably a new Chunin, as Naruto didn't recognize him, though his face looked vaguely familiar, as if the blonde had seen him some years below him at the academy, nodded, giving the scroll to Naruto. It's from Hokage-sama, she wants. But Naruto didn't wait for his explanation. It was easier to just see the hag in person. Tsunade was halfway into her third stack of paperwork, and was feeling rather good about it. Of course, she was failing to remember the large towering stacks around her desk, but at this point, it didn't seem like she ever cared to remember them. She sometimes wondered how the hell that flaxen-haired brat had roped her into this job, but all she had to do was remember his smiling sheepish face as he finished the Rasengan, complaining about how he'd never get strong enough to be Hokage at this rate. All she had to do was remember his laugh. There was a slight remnant to that exact face in the man in front of her, a little around the rounded, scarred cheeks. Most of it had been swallowed wholly by the shadow of Minato though, who lingered over every inch of the tanned blonde like a venerable cloak. Naruto, she greeted, pleasantly enough. Naruto smiled back. Hey, Aba-chan. Ga, how are you? What's the scroll for? Tsunade shrugged. Formalities. Half of her had expected that Chunin to come back a few hours later, apologetically explaining that he hadn't been able to find the blonde anywhere. She hadn't wanted to send a hawk in fear of the same, only in a shorter period of time. And then, Jiraiya's informed me of your mission. It's not much of a mission. Naruto shrugged. I'm just observing time periods, and not getting paid. He added pointedly. This could be considered more of volunteer work, considering there was no hefty check at the end. He's worried for you. Is that how this all started? Naruto rolled his eyes, exasperated. Typical. There was nothing faster than the Konoha Gravine. He didn't say as much, but I figured. She smirked, dryly. He's been unusually prudish lately. I haven't had any complaints from the local public baths. That is unusual. Naruto snorted, though wasn't nearly as surprised as he made it out to be. He could still recall Jiraiya's face, a somber mixture of resigned besetment and solicitude. I can call him, if you want. She began unsurely, eyes watching Naruto. If it helps, I can. No, said the blonde, more hurriedly than he'd meant to. That's not necessary. Tsunade raised a brow at such an illicit reaction. For a moment there, though she may have just imagined it, she was sure there had been a brief flicker of fear rising in the blonde's eyes. Did that idiot do something again? Or, she eyed him carefully, appraising him with a narrowed gaze, was it guilt festering beneath the surface? She debated calling him out on it, before leaning back in her chair with a heaved sigh. If you say so. Naruto nodded, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He's leaving us, Shikamaru. The Nara wondered how Sakura found him, then recalled that this was his usual haunt, and generally everyone came round at least once to talk to him. And by everyone he meant that loudmouth Kiba, appraising the voluptuous women, or what he assumed were, because Kiba wasn't exactly the best judge in females, as they passed. Occasionally Chuji, who nursed his chips more than his beer. Ino sometimes as well, though that was really just to use him as a ploy to pick up other guys. Even Lee, once or twice, unsurprisingly ordering a soda before chatting up the lazy Junin the entire night. That was a nightmare. So he wasn't entirely surprised that Sakura knew where he was, as she was ultimately the smartest of their bunch. Well, would have been, if not for him. But usually he didn't count, as mostly he did little else aside from sleep. He's not leaving. Shikamaru sighed, already knowing who she was referring to. It seemed to be the same person everyone was referring to. Naruto always did know how to stir up the Konoha gossip into a wild, brewing rage. Sakura looked like she thought the exact opposite. He's not that dumb. Though invariably, Naruto did have his rather dim moments. Do you think he'd actually betray the village? Of course not, snapped Sakura, looking offended. And then, deflating, sorry. I've just been on edge lately. Salright. He shrugged. For a moment, Shikamaru thought, hoped, she may just leave it at that. But Shikamaru, she began again, unsteadily, crushing his dreams, you saw him, he's not happy here. Shikamaru finished for her, resigning himself to another night of silent, insightful contemplation ruined. I know. She looked down, sullenly. What are we supposed to do, and then, what am I supposed to do? This isn't something you can just fix yourself, Sakura. Quite the opposite, actually. Obviously, it's Naruto's issue. If he decides to involve us, well, that's ultimately his decision as well. All we can do is stand by him and hope he resolves it himself. And if he doesn't, she refuted, voice rising. I mean, not that I don't trust him, because I do, implicitly, but Naruto has a tendency to put the world on his shoulders. He always has to be the hero, and I know it's getting him into trouble now, but he just refuses to see it like that, refuses for anyone to help him. And don't you think you're meddling a bit? Shikamaru pointed out, quite used to meddlesome women, as they dominated his life. I know, she bit out, slamming a frustrated fist into the countertop. The bartender wasn't particularly pleased, as almost every glassware he had rattled as the entire place quaked. The background chatter ceased into a weary silence. Sakura looked around, a little guiltily. I know, she repeated, quietly. Oh no, she wasn't going to cry, was she? You're worried, I get it. Shikamaru blew a raspberry. You don't have to be. But what happens? She looked away. What happens if he doesn't want to stay here anymore? Logically, he's going to renounce his title as a Konoha shinobi, so he doesn't get marked as a missing nin, probably resign all his duties and go back to wherever he's going. Though Shikamaru figured this was precisely what she didn't want to hear. And you're not concerned. Her voice was rising in pitch again. That he'll do that. That he'll leave. Yes, I'm concerned. Shikamaru rolled his eyes, wondering why all women were so needy. So needy and needing to be assured all the time. Maybe not all women though, he amended. After all, Temari would probably rather take a kunai to the foot than start whining. We're all concerned. Then don't tell me you haven't thought about it. Come up with ideas. She sat herself down on the stool. Do you have any idea where he's going? Any at all? Shikamaru gave pause. Of course he did. At some point in his life, he'd probably thought on everything. And recently, he'd also thought on Naruto, too. That knuckle-headed ninja, always getting himself into some sort of trouble. It seemed to rise with stunning perniciousness as he grew. I have a few, he admitted, though from his sour face it looked like he'd rather not share. After all, they didn't even make much sense, even in his own head. After all, Naruto would know better than to mess with something as all-encompassing as time, right? Sasuke grunted, watching the small fly that buzzed around one of the dimly lit lamps. Kabuto pushed up his glasses with one hand, leaning casually against the rock wall. Him and Sasuke, although he wasn't Orochimaru's subordinate for no reason, he knew that members of Team Heavy were outside the door, were inside a smaller mission room, with a large stretch table and some lamps. It was supposed to set the mood for something like an interrogation, but Sasuke was much too old to be fearing dreary caverns and craggy rocks. That's why said Uchiha leaned back casually in his chair, frowning into the darkness as he did so. Just a theory, of course. Kabuto smiled, leering. But it seems your Uzumaki friend is growing, very powerful. If anything, the scowl deepened. What the hell do you want with me then? There's no evidence of this, of course. We need you to watch Uzumaki closely. We don't know what exactly he's doing or how he's doing it. All we know is that he's extremely powerful and these chakra surges were caused by him. Can you do this? The man pushed up his glasses, eyes twinkling. A cold ferocity rose in those dark eyes at the implication. Of course. Smirking, Kabuto watched Sasuke leave the room. Orochimaru was right. It was so easy to use the Uchiha's pride against him. The boy was an easily manipulated fool. X. Minato frowned as he looked at the notes once again. As the Hokage-to-be, and counting down the weeks until such, he had easy access to the sections in the library that no one else could, but more importantly, he had access to the Great Hokage Library, filled with techniques no one could possibly even dream of. He was certain that after rummaging through it, much to the Sandaim's chagrin, the old man kept saying that he needed to be more careful with these books. He found the books he was looking for. Sadly, they were a bit vague on the topics he truly wanted more detail on. When he asked the Sandaime in person, hoping that the venerable, wise old man may hold more answers than any fortuitous, obscure text could, he was met with a literal brick wall. The Sandaime only mysteriously told him that he may need to look closer than he thought, which only confused the Yondaime to be even further. Was he talking of Naruto, then? That was, assuming that the Sandaime was aware of Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki, something even Minato hadn't found out about until recently. Jinchuriki. He tasted the word, like such an ancient, worn word that it almost sounded foreign. He'd heard it before, somewhere. Perhaps in some ambiguous mythlore he'd been told long ago, a circuitous reference he could no longer recall. There was a lot to Naruto he didn't know. And if there was a general rule of thumb to Minato, it was that he didn't like not knowing things. Predictability made him at ease, and Naruto seemed to be the exact opposite of that. Minato could admit to himself that he almost thought of the boy as his son, even though now he realized he knew virtually nothing about him. And his thoughts brought him, indirectly, once more to the blonde in question. Minato sighed. He could just never get away from the kid, huh? Naruto had disappeared again. Obito was relentlessly pacing their meeting place, a red bridge near one of the training fields, but Naruto hadn't shown up in about a week. In fact, there were times when the boy just seemed to disappear off the face of the earth. Rin had tried to use this new tracking jutsu she learned, to trace Naruto's chakra trail to wherever he was. This was still when the two technically, Kakashi was kind of out of it, had thought he was hiding from them and this was some sort of game. So they traced the trail, Minato following their lead amusingly. But, suddenly the trail stopped. Just stopped. There was nothing in its wake but a little bit of charred grass and an ink brush. The two actually, were puzzled, wondering if they had followed the wrong trail or something like that. Eventually, they had come to the conclusion that it was a clue that Naruto left for them. At this point, which was about the third day after Naruto's disappearance, Obito and Rin were both stumped on what these clues could mean. The charred grass had to mean fire or something, but what was with the ink brush? There was nothing to connect their evidence, and the two were ready to give up. By the fourth day, Obito had found another one of the clues. A piece of burned paper, not too far away from the end of the trail and taped to a bush. They figured the wind had carried it away. But by the fifth day the two of them had sighed and went back to their lame D-rank missions. But Minato knew something different. The charred paper and grass meant that the paper and grass were together, and the ink brush was probably from painting the paper. For what, he didn't know. Maybe Naruto was trying calligraphy and got angry, and ended up burning the thing, as ludicrous as the whole idea sounded. Then again, it was entirely possible that he and his team were making such a serious event out of what could be only a trivial matter. It certainly wouldn't be the first time, considering Obito. Sensei. He shook his head out of his musings, as Rin ran up to him. What's up, Rin-chan? The young brunette skidded to a halt in front of him, bangs flying out of her face as she beamed up at him. Naruto-kun's back. He blinked, eyes widening. So Naruto was finally back, huh? Rin took his hand and dragged him down the stairs, and as they burst out of the Hokage Tower she took off in the direction of downtown, and as they progressed further into the crowd, Minato realized they were going to Ichiraku Ramen. Of course, he smiled ruefully, Naruto would return and eat ramen. They were so alike sometimes it scared him. True to his thinking, Obito and Naruto were currently slurping down their second ramen bowl, at an alarming rate. He chuckled slightly. Where's Kakashi-kun? Sick. Obito answered breezily, between a large noodle. Rin nodded from beside him. He got caught with a bad cold yesterday, I guess his mask isn't really useful. Naruto chuckled. I think Kakashi uses his mask for different reasons. Minato looked down at him, stern face morphing into a grin with one look at the sunny blonde. Where have you been? Well, you see, Naruto rubbed at his head, setting his third bowl down. I was helping a nice girl with pink hair, and then I was talking to a pineapple for a bit. What a liar, Rin crowed, throwing a chopstick at his head. Naruto ducked. No consideration at all. He snorted, chortling. Why would I, when you're clearly making this all up? Rin puffed, looking annoyed. You're a terrible liar, Naruto. And the blonde smiled enigmatically. But I'm not lying. The girl rolled her eyes before laughing. She swiped more chopsticks and began to fling them good-naturedly at the blonde, Chuki voicing his protests as they ended up stuck into the side of the stall like kunai. Obito did as well, as Rin plucked his chopsticks right out of his mouth, crying out as he made a grab for them, only to duck as she flung a soy sauce bottle. This would mark the first time Naruto had ever been kicked out of Ichiraku, ever. Oddly, he wasn't too upset about it. But honestly, Naruto. Minato frowned, picking out a fish tail out of his hair. He gave a glance to the other blonde plodding next to him, half of his face and Junin vest splattered with paint. Where have you been? Around, shrugged the blonde. And where have you been, around, for this entire week? Minato asked, eyes narrowed. He knew he was being a bit petulant, but he'd been searching for the other blonde for the better part of 5 days. It was almost strange how easily it seemed the blonde could take a literal swan dive off the face of the earth. And why did you leave us clues? Rin piped up. Naruto stopped suddenly. Clues? He asked, face losing pallor. Yeah, like the paper and the ink brushes. Obito piped up. Minato caught the look of sheer timorousness draining the blonde of color, wondering what had the blonde so on edge. Quite apparently, they hadn't been left for them to find. And, true to his intuition, they hadn't been frivolous matters, either. Ah, well. And then just as quickly he was smiling again, rubbing at his hair. Minato noticed he did that a lot, hell, so did Minato. Well, my friend has been teaching me how to draw animals, but I got so sick of how terribly my drawings were that I just burned, well, a half-truth, anyway. Sai really did teach him how to draw, and it wasn't the first time he'd hurled a fireball at both the irritating Chunin and his own pathetic attempts. Minato only eyed him carefully, his gut warring with his logic. Of course it was something candidly meaningless, what else could it have been? And yet, in the back of his mind came the intuitive clarity honed from years on the field, that burning sensation that reminded him that something was amiss. So where did you go? Obito asked, breaking Tthe Hokage out of his thoughts as he peered up at the other blonde. Go, Naruto echoed, puzzled. I didn't go anywhere. I've been in Konoha this whole time. But, Rin protested. The chakra signature. Most shinobi can mask their chakra. Naruto reminded lightly, waving a finger at her. Rin blushed. That was true. Oh, wait, Obito butted in. Then, why did you mask your chakra? Naruto blinked owlishly. Minato paused. This was true, for once, Obito brought up a good point. If Naruto really wasn't up to nefarious purposes, what was he doing being so sneaky? Minato appraised the other blonde. Naruto had never really given any indication of being anything but a decorous, if not a little stubborn Junin. Was that a wrong impression? And then, the blonde pulled a face, laughing. I was spying on the bathhouse. Rin blinked, once, twice. And then, you pervert. She smacked him upside the head, only to have it turn out to be a log. Naruto snickered as he reappeared next to Obito, the boy giving the older Junin some ecstatic back-clapping and a few enthusiastic yelps. Minato wondered why everyone around him was so perverted. First Jiraiya, now Naruto, who would be next? Kakashi. Didn't strike you as a pervert, Naruto? He chuckled. Naruto only gave him a vulpine smirk. I learned from my sensei. Said the blonde, seriously, even as his eyes twinkled. Your sensei must have been quite a pervert. The Yondaime surmised, immediately thinking of Jiraiya. Seemed they shared that in common too. Yep, they both were, actually. Of course, Minato wasn't aware that they actually shared the same sensei. Rin gasped in horror. Oh no, Naruto-kun, Please don't tell me they rubbed off on you. I was peeking in the hot springs, said the blonde flatly, rolling his eyes. What do you think? Obito began to throw himself in fits with laughter, wheezing and coughing as Rin gave a terrified cry, waving a finger at Naruto incomprehensibly. Minato let out a bark of laughter, and Naruto found himself turning sharply at the sound, never seeing the Hokage come, so undone. So carefree. He couldn't help it. He was smiling too. Dot, dot, dot. Geez. Obito groaned, throwing his plow down on the dirt. I hate farming. What do you think you're doing? Rin wiped sweat off of her brow. Get back to work. Right. Obito squeaked, hastily drawing himself up again. He was a bit afraid of Rin at times like these. Especially when she growled and snarled and was sticky and sweaty, but more importantly, pissed as hell. They were in charge of plowing an old farmer's field. The man himself was sick and couldn't do it himself. Kakashi was finally over that sickness of his, and was somewhere in the backdrop farther off from them. But Obito and Rin were working side by side, that was, until Obito had decided to throw a fit. Honestly, Rin groaned more to herself than anything. I can't believe we have another one of these crap missions. Obito moped. Well, you were the one who said that you didn't want any more. I didn't say that. Rin hissed at him. Moron. I said that we should wait a little before taking on another tough mission, I didn't mean. She waved a hand over the large farmlands. This. Obito just sighed, adjusting his goggles with disdain as he noted the red angry marks they had made on his sweating forehead. It was way too hot to be in black. Actually, for mid-spring it was way too hot in general. Keep at it, kids. Minato waved from somewhere. His position on a large metal bucket seemed comfortable. Shut up. Rin squawked at him, looking away quickly so she didn't have to see her sensei laughing at them. Naruto watched the two with interest. It was kind of mean of you to give them such a crappy mission, he noted with glee. Minato rolled his eyes. You would have done the same. Good point. That's it. Obito, despite Rin's blatant protests, threw his plow on the ground again and growled. Sensei. Minato squeaked. The Hokage-to-be wasn't entirely sure if Obito's mad rage was induced by him or the heat. Either way, it didn't bode a good future for the blonde-haired Hokage. Naruto seemed to be a willing spectator to the event, an amused smile curving around the corners of his lips. Minato wanted to wipe the smug look right off his face. One day, the blonde would get a genin team of his own, and bear the brunt of their incessant needs. One day. We need training. The Uchiha groaned. As in now. As in like, flashy jutsu and cool moves and just, sensei please. I hate to agree with him. Rin called from a little ways off. But it's the truth. There was a moment of silence, as Naruto bowed his head in silent laughter, Obito howled in rage, Rin leaned against her plow, Minato gulped inconspicuously, and Kakashi continued onwards in his work. Was all the Namikaze could manage. Please, please. It would have worked perfectly, if Minato could actually figure something that he could teach them. Well, water walking. No. Already did. Tree walking. Definitely no, that was a while ago. Obito already knew the basics, and he didn't know what else he could teach them besides specialty moves, but even then, it wasn't like he had any moves that his students could learn. Rasengan. Wasn't that a bit of overwork for a training session? Oi, Obito. The boy looked up as Naruto called him. The blonde, who up until then had seemed perfectly content to lounge in the background, sauntered next to the Uchiha. The blonde grinned. Why don't you show me what you know? For a moment, Obito, uncomprehending, only stared curiously at the older ninja. And then, as he fully understood what Naruto was implying, cheered. Somewhere, between shuffled dirt and plants, Rin groaned. Watch out, cause this one's gonna hurt. Naruto grinned widely, acting more like his avid reading sensei than he'd ever publicly admit, and enjoying every moment of it. If the Uchiha noticed the blonde's light, jovial mood, he certainly didn't show it. In fact, he seemed a bit too preoccupied with his hand seals, a movement which was coming on slowly, but steadily. He still didn't notice, even as Naruto's grin grew more mischievous as their spar progressed. And further still, as he recklessly charged at Naruto in a stubbornness that may quite possibly be inherent in only Uchiha. And then, his eyes widened. And finally, did he look up, surprised and with foreboding horror, to court the leering smirk on Naruto's face. Kawarimi. 1,000 years of pain. Obito yowled as he was sent flying through the air. Minato fell clear of his upturned seat, howling with laughter and smacking the side of the bucket repeatedly, looking like he may just go into cardiac arrest. Rin had dropped her plow in horror, and Kakashi, well, miraculously Kakashi was absolutely unaware of the good use his future technique was made into, and was tediously tending to his plants. Though perhaps not, as someone made a loud choking noise in the background, and Naruto glanced over to see Kakashi twisting around to stare in incomprehensive wonder as Obito quite literally flew by the seat of his pants. That was totally wicked. Rin cried aloud, loud enough for all of them to hear, regardless of Obito's rather vocal MDS of pain. In a typical Naruto fashion, the blonde only rubbed the back of his head, looking mostly humbled by Rin's obvious, and quite rightly, lionization of him. For a full 3 seconds Rin was completely sure that Naruto was the closest thing to a wise and fair god, as no one had yet to so righteously put Obito into his place as the blonde had easily done, this side of the sun, when Obito sprang up with more vigor than usual, flying into his hand-sealing process all over again, behind the unsuspecting blonde. The brunette opened her mouth to warn the blonde, just as Obito opened his. Naruto watch. Kaiten, Hausenka no Jutsu. Surely the blonde must have realized they were coming, as the fireballs erupted from Obito's tea and seared the already moistened air around them into a fiery blaze, and he had already turned to watch them approach him, turned, and seemed to do little, if anything else. And then, Rin realized that he really wasn't going to do anything else. Naruto. But the blonde only seemed to stare them down, before leaping entirely straight through them, as if they had been nothing but an illusion. Rin gaped, nimbly dodging the incoming fireballs as they crashed into the ground, her and Minato having the arduous task of getting around the attack that Naruto already effortlessly dodged. Well actually, he hadn't dodged at all, which Rin was still trying to wrap her head around. She looked up as Obito chortled in awe and laughter, having been tackled to the ground by the surprising blonde, quite clearly down for the count this time. Naruto was grinning down at him, looking quite literally like the cat who got the cream. After wiping away most of the flyaway, and burnt, hair from the impromptu workout she just got, Rin galloped over to them, beaming. How did you do that? Naruto got up, giving a hand to the startled Uchiha beneath him. Oh, I dunno, practice I guess. So cool. Obito practically leapt at him as he stood, hopping over the upturned dirt to do so. You've got to teach me that. He scratched his cheek, laughing sheepishly. Ah well, maybe, but unfortunately for the Uchiha, his unnatural affinity to fire wasn't anything that could be taught. Yeah, so, he may have gotten me that time. May have. Rin butted in incredulously, grabbing for another piece of sushi. Alright, so he did. Obito amended, not even looking winded from his long monologue on his and Naruto's spar, an event which really didn't need retelling, as it had happened a few hours ago, taking a sip of his drink as he did so. But I'll have you guys know that pretty soon it'll be me kicking his ass. I'm going to come with a technique that's not only better than his, it'll be the best ever. Even better than Sensei's Rasengan. Rin quipped. Thousands. Obito agreed, quite serious. Minato looked mostly amused at the blatant disregard for his ultimate technique, only fondly ruffling Obito's hair. He reached for the check before Naruto could even think to, catching the other blonde's smirk with a knowing eye as he moved it out of his read. This one's on me. Naruto looked reluctant, but held off. You're asking to go broke, said the other blonde, with a shrug. This is true. Rin nodded sagely. It's no secret that Obito can eat 10 times his body weight. 2 times. Obito narrowed his eyes. And that was only once. No. Just 2 weeks ago when we went to grass you must have consumed at least 200 pounds of rice. That's not even physically possible. The two blondes only let them continue their bantering with an endearing ear, the two of them almost seeming to grow used to the incessant arguing that seemed to inevitably follow when Rin and Obito were in the same room. For a brief second, Naruto thought of how cute of a couple the two could grow to be, the amusing, dear illusion shattered at the thought that neither of the two would ever live to see the day. But this is the past, Naruto reminded himself, with bitter hope. And that's the future. And, for now, neither of the two mattered, because for Naruto, right now, it wasn't either. It was simply, the present. And then, with desolation. But not for long. Soon enough, Rin and Obito went their separate ways, Rin to her house and Obito back to the perpetual gloom of the Uchiha district, neither of the two seeming particularly enamored with the thought of returning home from their surprisingly fun day of D-rank missions. Naruto found himself in a sudden, abrupt silence with Minato, the quiet, warm summer night air devoid of continuous noise now that Rin and Obito left. That was a pretty cool trick, Minato revealed, as the two plodded along together. You think so? Naruto looked up thoughtfully, thinking of how inspired he'd been when the technique had been used on him, after getting over all the pain, of course. Yeah, how'd you come up with it? It's pretty inventive. At the apt description of the jutsu's ingenuity, Naruto laughed. It definitely is, but I didn't come up with it. And then, with no small amount of embarrassment, actually, the reason why I know it is because it was used on me at some point. An experience you won't ever forget, I'm sure. Minato chuckled. Not in this lifetime, no. Naruto agreed. All too soon he was once more standing at another crossroad, though in a more figurative sense, he'd been standing at one for quite a while, as Minato was meant to head back to his home, and Naruto to his hotel, and the inevitable future that lay many years away. I'll see you tomorrow, Minato bid cheerily, already moving to the other side of the road. Minato. His breath caught in his tea, in a vicious struggle to erupt out of his mouth. Words wrangled at his tongue, wisdom too dangerous ready to leap from his tongue. For a moment, a startling, clear moment, he imagined himself pulling the blonde aside, this glorious man who would one day save Konoha, and possibly the world, who right now was only a slightly unsure man with a great destiny ahead of himself, and whispering the very tumultuous thoughts that plagued his mind, if only for the selfish notion to get them off of it. But then the moment passed, the significant widening of Minato's eyes and the easing off of Naruto's tension, and the blonde found himself back at the crossroad, Minato pausing curiously to hear what he had to say. But the blonde only shook his head, an enigmatic smile to his face. Never mind. And with that, Minato watched him walk off in the dark, cicadas loud in the night air. Dot, 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 and didn't see him again in almost 2 years. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.